Georgia woke early, before dawn. Her first sleep at Oakhill had been an uncomfortable one. The temperature had only dipped below 30 at midnight, and so already the morning felt oppressively thick and hot. She stood in the loft of her new home, staring silently at a mirror, pondering her reflection. "There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth," she whispered to herself. "We are all crew." These were the words that she had repeated to herself every morning for as long as she could remember. But now, instead of hope and purpose, the words made her afraid. "Action is the antidote to despair," she reassured herself. But there had been no action, and now all that was left were words. "Just try not to think about it," she thought. Her mind raced, and her heart followed, and though she tried to quell the disquiet, it was unyielding and vicious. Tears came. Jack would be headed to the dome soon, so she dried her face and thought, "It's your first day. Get a hold of yourself." She walked to the foot of her bed where her bags were sitting, open but still packed, and from them pulled out a blue worksuit. "Focus, Georgia," she said aloud. Just then she heard Jack's voice from outside. "Georgia, good morning." Pulling on her worksuit and zipping up the front, she stopped short of the ladder. Gathering herself with a deep breath, she climbed down and went outside. There was Jack, and she greeted him. "Good morning." "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Yes, thank you," she replied. Jack looked at her with a slight frown. "Huh, it was pretty miserable last night. If you slept well, you're luckier than I was." "Well, I feel lucky," she lied. "It's a lucky day. You're going to enjoy meeting the bench. They're excited to meet you." Jack was sinewy and tanned, with a tall, narrow face that was unshaven and dark. His striking visage was capped in a shiny, balding dome, and great beads of sweat gathered upon his brow. He wore a dark blue worksuit, much like Georgia's, though his was stained with years of daily use. Standing at ease, he'd left the front zipper of his suit halfway undone, exposing a tangle of graying chest hair. They strode down a gravel pathway toward the center of the village, where dozens of micro-homes clustered under supertrees all about them. They walked through luscious gardens full of greenhouses, fountains, panels, sheds, tables, seats, sculptures, and lights. Even the sound of a piano lingered sweetly in the air. "This is what heaven must be like," said Georgia. "I've got to admit, it completely surpassed my expectations," replied Jack. "I still can't believe that I was selected. After the initial interview, I was sure I'd bombed it." "I'm not supposed to tell you this, but we really liked that interview," Jack laughed. "I mean, you were clearly nervous as hell, but most people are, so we just try and listen to what we hear. And with you, everything you said was perfect. And it was passionate." "Well, obviously I'm glad," Georgia blushed. "But I was a total wreck after that. I didn't think I'd get a call back, and I'd been preparing for the practical examination for months. I thought all that work had been for nothing." "We were all pretty excited to see how you'd do on the practical," replied Jack. "Your references were quite complimentary. I'm also not supposed to tell you this, but your boss flat out said he didn't want to let you go." "Are you serious?" asked Georgia. "Oh my God." "And on the practical, you ranked second out of 50. And the person who came first was a totally miserable bastard. His entrance essay was bad. Horrible, even. It might be hard for you to believe, but with regards to your candidacy, the vote was unanimous. Pretty much from the beginning, you were tipped to win. I'm happy to hear it, she replied. But in truth, all she felt was the weight of great expectations. The Oakhill dome was visible from every corner of the village. It stood 3 stories tall and was completed with a shining glass rotunda. It reminded Georgia of her trip to Tokyo, where Mount Fuji hung gently in the distance, ever present and smiling. Jack, I'm astounded that this place works so well, she said. He stopped for a moment, and nodding, replied, They said utopia wasn't possible, but here we are. And it turns out the secret was basically plumbing. And fish. Oakhill's aquaponics infrastructure produced tons of fish every month. Oakhill tilapia was a beloved local brand, and since global fish stocks had begun to crash, it was the most dependable supply of affordable, high-quality protein in the region. The founder's vision was of a collectively owned and managed community, where everyone partook of the shared abundance and scarcity, together as one. And on paper it looked promising. The theory went that by maximizing the automation of water, energy, and food production, the residents' time would be freed to cultivate their land, and themselves, however they wished. And Oakhill tilapia proved it in a big way. After it was established that solar villages could be profitable, they started to gain attention in the media, and the rest, as they say, was history. They approached the ground floor entrance, where 3 revolving glass doors sat nestled underneath hanging gardens. Up close, the dome seemed somehow more compact. Perhaps it was that, with such a pleasing design and attention to detail, it sat so comfortably in its surroundings, in a way that you might not otherwise expect from such a large, artificial structure. Welcome to the dome, said Jack. My guess is that you're already familiar, but the abbreviated tour goes like this. He went to speak, but then paused unexpectedly. By the way, we stopped doing dome tours last year. Did you hear about that? Of course she'd heard. Everyone had heard about that. She remembered at the time thinking of how perhaps it was a sign of things to come. She nodded, and Jack continued. Okay, so starting with basement 2, you've got personal storage lockers and cryogenics. Fun fact, the main batteries are actually buried underneath the storage lockers. Basement 1 has the print shop, the agro labs, and robotics. Ground has the kitchen, laundry, and dining. Floor 1 has a co-working space with 12 offices, a boardroom, and an amphitheater. There are 6, I think, multi-purpose rooms on the south side. You'll have to check me on that. So, that's the tour. Let's grab a coffee and then head up to engineering. They walked through the revolving doors. Georgia had been looking forward to this moment for a long time. Winning a spot on the Oakhill engineering bench was a fortunate turn of events, but walking through the front doors of the building where the Solar Village Manifesto was actually written was the honor of her lifetime. Coffee, this way, said Jack. They walked through a corridor to the kitchen, where a group of blue-suited engineers had gathered around a large metal espresso machine, discussing and laughing amongst themselves. Jack and Georgia approached the bench and stood patiently to one side while the barista finished a conversation. She then reached out for Jack's reusable cup and said, "Jack, good morning." "Good morning," he replied. "Just the usual, please." Georgia listened as Jack and the barista bantered about wastewater systems, until one particular phrase caught her attention. To manage every last drop. Though genuinely curious and keen to appear interested, her thoughts drifted away to another time, to long showers, the most luxurious relic of her childhood. She remembered a time when people weren't so vigilant, when they didn't file for bankruptcy because of their utility bills. How has it come to this? How could we have been so foolish? She thought. Then she felt a soft touch on her arm. And what can I get for you? She looked up to see the smiling face of the barista. Georgia was speechless. She wanted a flat white, but her mouth was full of rocks. A flat white, please, she stammered. She was taken by complete surprise. She knew they'd meet eventually, but never imagined it would be so informally, or so soon. Her mind raced desperately for words, but her composure was lost, and her gut collapsed into a heap of knots. Great first impression, she thought. Fortunately for her, Jack intervened. Michelle, this is Georgia. She's the new junior on the bench. When Michelle Morley smiled, she did it with a certain magic, her eyes and mouth shining like rays of sunlight. Welcome to Oakhill, she said. We're glad you've joined us. Thank you. It's an absolute honor to meet you, Georgia replied. I wouldn't go that far, Michelle laughed. But it's nice to meet you too. Jack tells me you're into agrotech. Yeah, that's right. Well, without getting into detail right now, you've come at an interesting time, said Michelle, passing Georgia her coffee. We'll go over the briefing upstairs, but I wanted to let you know that if you need anything at all, just find me. With folded hands, Georgia bowed. Absolutely, thank you, Michelle. Michelle smiled and nodded earnestly in reply, and Georgia became flushed as she felt, or maybe imagined, smirks from a couple of the gathered engineers. No one bowed in Australia, and certainly no one bowed here in the village. How embarrassing, she thought as she followed Jack, taking the bench seat next to his. So that's her. I have to admit I was not expecting her to be the barista. Yep, she's not just a singer, Jack laughed. In fact, Michelle was a singer, a barista, and the author of the Solar Village Manifesto. She had founded Oakhill. Georgia looked down at her coffee and smiled. The shape of a leaf poured into the foam.